That's great. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we will kick off right away. It is my singular privilege to welcome us all to this webinar that promises to be very insightful and impactful. And before we proceed this afternoon, please permit me to establish the protocol for today by acknowledging the justices of the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and High Court that might be present here, the president of the Nigerian Bar Association and the executives, the chairman of the section Legal Practice, Senior Advocates of Nigeria, the magistrates, learned gentlemen and gentlemen in skirts of the legal profession, ladies and gentlemen here present. Thank you once again for making out the time to join this webinar on the law and reality of child labor and domestic staffing. My name is Chimdemma Onwebu. Feel free to call me Chimde if you need to speak to me directly, and I will be moderating this event. So just for context, for those who are not already aware, this webinar is organized by the Nigerian Bar Association section on legal practice, which is ably chaired by Mrs. Boma Alabi, OON Senior Advocate of Nigeria, in conjunction with the Family Law and Human Rights Committee chaired by Mrs. Nancy Obinwa. So in this webinar, we will be led on a journey that I consider to be a journey of deep reflection and awareness, and will be led by legal giants and industry captains who we will introduce as we progress in this webinar. And so we are hopeful that our interactions here today will lay bare the legalities on child labor and domestic staffing, which is a very touchy topic in our climb. And we're hoping that these discussions and interactions today will unearth the gross violation of human rights and the desecration of human dignity that comes with child labor and unethical domestic staffing. And of course, we're hoping that as the discussions go on, we won't lose sight of what our current realities are, economic realities, cultural realities, religious realities, and every other thing that affects us as a people. So to kick off this webinar in earnest, I will very shortly invite the section chair to give us a brief welcome address. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to lay out some ground rules that will enable us make the best of our time together this evening. So first, I'd like to let us all know that this session is recorded, and by continuing to stay, you're giving your consent to the organizers to have you on record. Please, if for any reason you feel otherwise, you feel you do not need to be recorded or wouldn't feel comfortable being recorded, please feel free to leave the meeting without any guilt at all. Your right to not consenting is fully acknowledged and it is protected. The second ground rule will be that we are expected to have our microphones muted throughout the period of this webinar, except of course when you're called upon to speak. And please, while speaking, let's be civil and mindful of how our words and our tone could affect other attendees in this session. You're welcome to keep your camera on, only if your environment will not be a distraction. So please feel free to be heard and not seen on this occasion. The chat box is open for comments, for questions, and general interactions, and we strongly recommend that we use that chat box as our major medium of communication during this webinar. Please, if there are questions thrown open or posed, kindly participate, as your response will help the propagation of the gospel according to Child Rights Act and ethical domestic staffing, which is what we intend to achieve in this webinar. And please, when you are prompted to do so, feel free to use any emojis that are appropriate at the time. And please do not forget to use emojis responsibly, because I've been in webinars where emojis were used wrongly, and then it left some level of confusion on what the person was trying to achieve. So having led those ground rules, let's move right along as I would like to welcome the NBA section on legal practice chairman, Mrs. Boma Alabi, OON-ACN, for her welcome address. Mrs. Boma Alabi, please.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed for the very consummate opening and making ground rules very clear. I hope I'm clear and you can all hear me.
Positive.
Great. Well, I am really excited that Family Law and Human Rights Committee of the SLP, it's one and the same, so not in conjunction with, is actually putting up this webinar. And when our able chairman, Nancy, approached me to ask if we could open it up to non-members and non-lawyers, I was all for it. Because domestic help is very much a part of our culture, be it an external person or a young cousin or something. And it's important that we understand that, you know, human rights are not negotiable. The fact that they are, you know, vulnerable and dependent means that we owe them an even greater duty of protection. I saw that when I was growing up. The gate man in our home, my parents trained all his children, and they're all graduates like we are. So they did not discriminate against those children, and there was no child labor. They played with us same way as we, the children of the home, were treated as children. I'm glad to see that the law has caught up with best practice, and I certainly am so looking forward to this webinar, because we always learn. We have a fantastic array of speakers. My Lord Justice of the Court of Appeal, Justice Suzette Nyesom-Wike, wishing you a belated happy birthday. My Lord's birthday was just a few days ago. And all the other distinguished and eminent speakers. I will not say more because I don't want to take up your time. We look forward to hearing from you all. And I thank you on behalf of the Nigerian Bar Association Section on Legal Practice for accepting to be our resource persons today. Thank you, Chindi. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for making that speech very concise and straightforward, because we are very time constrained in this webinar. And so thank you. Thank you for keeping to that, and we appreciate you. All right, so we will get straight on because we don't want to keep us here longer than necessary. I'll go straight on to try to introduce us to the array of legal giants and industry captains that we have here this afternoon that will be talking to us on this sensitive yet very important topic. And so I'll try to read out some concise biography about them. This is not everything they are, but it's just a summary to give us an idea, the people that we will be listening to this afternoon. And so first on my list would be Honorable Justice Eberechi Suzette Nyesom-Wike, Justice of the Court of Appeal and Distinguished Service Star of Rivers State. Honorable Justice Eberechi Suzette Nyesom-Wike is a distinguished judicial officer with decades of successful judicial experience. She has served as a magistrate, a judge, and now Justice of the Court of Appeal. My Lord is deeply committed to using the law for social change and peaceful conflict resolution. She's the founder of the Suzette Family First Foundation and a pioneer advocate for children's rights, ethics, and family law. And she's also known for her work on Reeve Ethics on Radio and her contributions to legal literature. My Lord is also a prominent member and leader in several national and international legal and women's organizations. This reflects her dedication to justice, education, and social development. Ladies and gentlemen, please can we give an e-clap to my Lord, Honorable Justice Eberechi Suzette Nyesom-Wike. An e-clap, please. We could use the clap reaction here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. The next person on our list who will be listening to this afternoon is Mr. Oseinuma Ubeku. Please forgive me if I've not pronounced your name correctly.
I will try to forgive you.
Thank you. So would you like just saying what your name is so I can try mimicking that?
You can call me Ose for short.
Okay,
I think it's
Mr. Ose. Thank you very much for that. So Mr. Ose is a seasoned legal practitioner and partner at the Lawcrest LLP, where he leads the employment law, HR, immigration, and data privacy teams. He holds advanced degrees in employment law, international labor standards, and human resource management. And he is also a respected advisor to multinationals, government bodies, and private organizations on employment frameworks and HR policies. As a recognized expert, Mr. Osei has contributed to the development of sexual harassment policies for the Nigerian Bar Association, and he provides immigration advisory services to both individuals and organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a round of applause to Mr. Osei? An e-clap, of course. All right, thank you very much. So next year we'll be reading out citation of Mrs. Ileana Martins. Mrs. Ileana Martins is a veteran legal practitioner with over 3 decades of experience. She is known for her strong advocacy for justice and the rights of vulnerable groups, especially women and children. She is the country vice president and national president of the International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA, Nigeria. As a respected mediator and peace ambassador, Mrs. Martins is deeply involved in alternative dispute resolution and has been recognized with multiple merit awards for her outstanding service and dedication to the legal profession. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, a round of e-clap for Mrs. Ileana Martins. Thank you very much. And last but not the least at all, we have Mr. Olakunle Sani. Mr. Olakunle is a dedicated advocate with over 15 years of experience in championing the rights and protection of vulnerable children and victims of child labor. He is the founder of the Childhood Advancement Response and Empowerment Initiative and an alternative school known as the School in the Street. He also holds key positions such as the National Coordinator of Child Protection Network, Nigeria. Recognized for his expertise, Mr. Olakunle serves on multiple national committees and has received awards for his impactful contributions. Sorry? Okay. So Mr. Olakunle Sani has serves on multiple national committees and has received awards for his impactful contributions to child rights and safeguarding across Africa. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, an e-clap for Mr. Olakunle Sani. All right, can I warmly welcome those who are just joining us at this time, and we appreciate your presence here. One of our ground rules before we started was that all of us, everyone on this call should try to keep our microphones muted throughout the period of our presence in this webinar, except of course, you have the floor to speak. That will help us progress faster and reduce any form of interference. And so without any further ado, would like to welcome our very first speaker on this webinar. That will be my Lord, Honorable Justice Eberichi Suzette Nyesom Wike. My Lord, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chimzi. I hope I got your name correct. Okay. And let me use this opportunity to welcome everyone to this webinar. I especially want to acknowledge the chair of the session. I will call her a bosom friend. I hope she calls me that too. I remember once when we met, I told her a little story about when I was much younger in secondary school, and I used to be, more like an advocate. I don't think I started today, I started since then, trying to protect the girls in my class and anybody who I see was weaker or being bullied. And she gave me a name that I'm not going to mention on this platform. But every time I think about her, I remember that name and it makes me laugh. So, Auntie Boma, very good to hear your voice as always. And then I'm really pleased to be here. Um, so, for two reasons, I want to thank the organizers of this program. First of all, for um, finding me worthy to be a facilitator here, or well, a speaker here in this on this platform, and also because the time is apt for us to talk about subjects such as this, because we see that this kind of topic you can never say too much about them. Child laborers, are all over our streets, and a lot of hazards come with all of that. So, I would like to start first of all by defining what child means. And for the purpose of this paper, I will adopt definition of child as given by Section 277 of the Child's Rights Act, and that is that a child means a person under the age of 18 years. And this means that a person under the 18, and in any child, any person under the age of 18 years is a child, of course, and of course, over that, they've attained majority. But we know that in different states of our country, the age limit for being called a child is all different. Some put it at 12, some 14, some 16, and a lot of them at 18. So we see that, of course, our children are treated differently in different parts of the country. They are not treated the same, and I don't believe that is fair because children are children and they're people and their rights should be respected and they should enjoy, you know, or experience childhood without, all these hazards until they are able to be mature enough to take on adulthood. The next I will define will be labor, and in this context, it is used in the topic as this topic encompasses various forms of work, including physical work, for example, construction, hawking, etc., and intellectual work like writing, research, computer programming, etc. We can therefore safely say that child labor is the employment of a person under the age of 18 to undertake any physical or intellectual work for profit accruable to the employer. The menace of child labor is on a steady rise in Nigeria. And as I've said before, our streets and busy roads are host to a litany of hawkers, many stores. Eateries, restaurants, factories employ children. And of course, like I said, there are different hazards. Sometimes, they get caught up in traffic, they get beaten, they get raped, they get even killed by accidental how will I say now? Cars will run over them, hit and run drivers, and a lot of hazards, they're open to a lot of hazards of that um, child labor, whatever instance that they are working in. So on the 25th of May 2025, I came across one of these bloggers, Linda Ikeji, at Linda Ikeji blog, where it was trending that an 11 years old boy was employed as a mortuary attendant, and his duties was to attend to the physical preservation needs of the corpses at the morgue. And of course, we know this is cruel. And growing up as a child, I never saw any any corpse except my two grandfathers when they died and they were laid in state before their burial. So this kind of child in this kind of situation, you can imagine what the effect of that will be on that child. The child will grow up to possibly not have respect for human life as such because he's seen so many bodies, and of course his sense of empathy will be affected, and that kind of exposure is psychologically impactful on that child. So um, that child should not be in such a situation. I'm sorry. I'm
Please,
sorry.
please go ahead, Milord. I think that's an attendee. And not to cut you short, please. I know I should have said this before we started. We are trying to keep all of our speakers on nearer to 10 minutes than 15 minutes so that we can have enough time
Okay.
for
I'll
question
try.
and answer. I know how difficult this is for you, but please, thank you
I'll
very
try.
much.
Okay, so Section 23 of the Child's Right Act prohibits exploitation of any child through child labor, and anyone who contravenes this provision commits an offense, and upon conviction, such a person will be liable to the fine of 50,000 naira or imprisonment for 5 years or both of those punishments. And by virtue of Section 24 of the Child's Rights Act, if the offense of child labor is committed by a body corporate, the punishment will be a conviction of the fine of 250,000 naira. However, in Section 29 of the same Child's Rights Act, it provides that Section 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and 63 of the Labor Act should apply to children under the Child's Rights Act. To me, this provision whittles down the provision of that same Section 28 of the Child's Rights Act. And this is so because by virtue of Section 59 of the Labor Act, a young person under 14 years old may be employed on a daily wage or day-to-day basis, and so long as he returns each night to his parents or guardian's residence. We should realize that children should be in school, attaining an education and preparing for their future. And at that time when they are working, so daytime is the time to attend school, and so there's a conflict between school and work. The child cannot be in school if the child is working. Also, Section 60 and 61 of the Labor Act puts the employment age of young person under the respective sections at 16 years and above 15 years and above. So this is a conflict with the Child's Rights Act, clearly. Section 64 of the Labor Act provides for the offense and punishment for contravention of sections 59 and to 62 of the Labor Act, which punishment on conviction is a fine that will not exceed 100 naira. Of course, we know that is a very detailed act. And of course, I don't know, I'm a very big advocate of the fact that laws should be reviewed from time to time. When they've been there and been applied for like 10 years, at the minimum, they should be reviewed because, of course, we know society is dynamic, our customs, our traditions are dynamic. So the law should also move to meet with the changes in society, else we will be going nowhere. So in proving the offense under Section 64 of the Labor Act, the prosecution will prove that the victim was under the age of 12, 14, 15, 16, or 18 years on the date of the commission of the alleged crime. So I move forward to the provisions in the Labor Act. Excuse me. I'm trying to see about picking, more than as much as I can, since the time is quite short and I seem to be wasting time doing this. I'm sorry. So, Section 59 of the Labor Act, which is the Labor Act of trying to get the year now. Mm. Oh, can't find that. On the course of talking, if I find it, I'll let you know. So, the Nigerian Labor Act defines domestic worker as a domestic servant. And even as one is recognized as an employment, that is one in such a situation is recognized to be in an employment, I'm yet to fully understand whether by the use of servant reduces the rights.
Sorry, Milord, can you unmute?
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. So I was saying that in the Labor Act, the Nigerian Labor Act defines the domestic worker as a domestic servant. So it's a bit confusing. When they say domestic servant, does it reduce the rights and protection and benefits accruable to the domestic servant? As Section 88 sub 1A and B uses workers or domestic workers. So I haven't thought this through completely, but my mind is still working on it. But I'm wondering, domestic servant and domestic staff or domestic worker, you know, whether gives them any advantage or disadvantage. So Section 59 of the Labor Act also provides that no child should be employed or work in any capacity except where he's employed by the member of his family on light work or agricultural, horticultural, or domestic character approved by the minister. This is another conflict with the Labor Act. Nigerian Labor Act, oh goodness, excuse me. Nigerian Labor Act and Nigerian Labor Act and the labor law. So there has to be something done, with our something done with the conflict between the Child's Rights Act, the Labor Act, and oh God, I'm sorry, don't know how to do this. Because of this conflict, something should be done about the Labor Act and those provisions that conflict with the Child's Rights Act. Like I said, I'm a proponent of laws being reviewed. That 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, and 64, the Labor Act should be amended, in line with Section 28 of the Child's Rights Act. And without that, of course, we will not have any definition of really what a child is or who a child is, whether it is 12, 14, 16, 18, or below or beyond. We need to really marry these two legislations, excuse me, so that they do agree and not have conflict, because it will become confusing. So I've noted that we have a lot of laws dealing with labor. There's the EFCC Act. If you check Section 46, you will find that child labor is mentioned amongst all those other offenses, like money laundering, stealing, and different, if I'll call it, like, it seems like higher standard of crime. But even the child labor is mentioned there, and that tells you the importance, that is placed on children not being used, to make money. But we see and realize that this happens on a daily, and it's not stopping, and we haven't really started doing anything to enforce this law. So the law is sometimes not a problem. We have a litany of different kinds of laws talking about children's rights, but then are we enforcing it? Are we doing anything about making sure that people are punished when they engage in this kind of ways? Because, the law is there to guide, and if we don't enforce it, I mean, people will not be deterred, in engaging in child labor. Lack of enforcement of law prohibiting and criminalizing child labor in Nigeria militates against combating child labor in Nigeria. We should see about, you know, enforcing our laws. Poverty and lack of access to education are major drivers of child labor in Nigeria. One of the influencers of child labor in Nigeria is poverty. Many families grapple with survival, and as such, parents, guardians often put their children below 18 years to one form of labor or the other to make ends meet in the family. Aside guardians and parents so engage in children, parents and guardians also hand over their children to other persons to employ these children in their various workplaces and hand over peanuts to their parents and guardians, or without any pecuniary benefits to them, save for the hope that such children will be fed, sheltered, clothed, educated, and trained in one skilled labor or order in the long term. These poor parents and guardians see this exposure to their children as a means of breaking away from the shackles of poverty in the family. And of course, we've noted some of the hazards that these children go through. Another energizer of child labor is lack of access to education. In 2025, Nigeria is estimated to have 10.2 million out of school children at primary school level. The estimate for junior secondary school and out of school children is 8.1 million, while children who have never attended school in Nigeria is estimated at about 12.4 million children. Nigeria accounts for 15% of the global population of out-of-school children. This is scary and unacceptable. Underfunding of our education is the major issue bedeviling our educational system in Nigeria, and as such, government at all levels must scale up funding of education in order to address this ugly situation which pushes our children who should be in school gaining knowledge into child labor for survival. We also have cultural attitudes and the lack of awareness about the importance of education. Some of our cultural practices in Nigeria also propel the child labor, especially the apprenticeship culture, child housing culture, begging for alms culture, farming culture, etc. Rather than children of school age being enrolled in school, they are enlisted as apprentices, housekeepers, beggars, farmers, etc., which different cultures permit. I am big on the apprenticeship culture, which has helped transfer skills from generation to generation, but enlistment in apprenticeship should be limited to children who have at least completed their secondary school education. This way, the child would have gained basic education, which also held will also help the child, in his or her choice of vocation for which he or she may be enrolled as an apprentice. However, a situation where a child of 10 years old or less is enrolled as an apprentice and by such an enrollment misses out on all forms of formal education is a precursor to child labor. I have to note here that the Child's Rights Act provides for free education up to the junior, primary school level. In other words, it doesn't provide for secondary school level. And we see how people, graduates from the university, find it even hard to get jobs, much less one that just finished from primary school. So that needs to be upped, you know. We need to make it better. In River State, we've moved it up to senior secondary school level, but that is still not enough. Taraba State has moved it up to the university level where they pay for half of every student who goes into the university. And, we cannot do much without education. That is the bedrock of every child, every human being, actually. So that if you have an education, you'll be able to, make informed choices and then, make decisions that will make your life better. But without education, we certainly are not going anywhere. Many people in our country are either unaware of the importance of education or trivialize its importance. There's a direct correlation between education and child labor in Nigeria. On the average, children complete their secondary school education from the age of 16. Therefore, if a child is enrolled in school and completes the course of his or her education up to school certificate level, such a child is unlikely to be exposed to the tendency of child labor anytime before the child turns 16 years old, excuse me. If a child is educated up to higher education level, the child will be enrolled in school up to when such child will be 18 years, and upon completion, there is zero likelihood that such a child will be exposed to child labor practices. It is therefore imperative that government and at all levels, non-governmental organizations, individuals, and corporate entities join in the crusade of creating greater awareness on the importance of education and the dangers of child labor, which exploits our children and deprive them of their right to being children. As I've said before, the time for work is still the same time for school, so there's a conflict. And you have to make a choice of one or the other. And it could be to the detriment of children when they start working that early. Domestic work is okay, yes, chores at home, but not the kind of labor that exposes them even to the dangers and the hazards of the occupation that they're engaging in. So the role of the family court in addressing this menace by Section 1.
Milord, sorry, not to cut you short, but
Am
we're
I
really constrained by time here,
Mhm.
and it's time for the next. So we just want to give you 1 or 2 more minutes to just wrap up what you have for us. We know that you have so much, so just be constrained by time in this meeting.
It's okay.
Thank you.
I wish I had that notice, then I would have made it a bit more compact.
Easier.
But in effect, summarizing, excuse me, we need to do more for our children. We need more child advocates. We need more people who will stand up for the rights of our children and to make sure that we stamp out child labor and help our children be children until they mature, and then they have to now start taking on responsibilities because it's not good either for their health or even for their minds that are growing. And children should be allowed to be children so that when they learn, and of course, I've always said it, the best thing you can give to a child, two things actually: a good education and instilling the fear of God and the child that will help them develop good ethics that they will abide by and be good citizens and responsible future leaders. So we all must come together and make sure this happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Milord. Please, can we give a round of applause to Milord for this compact yet insightful delivery that she's given to us this afternoon. Thank you so much. A couple of things that I picked up from this. Personally, this topic is personal to me because I was orphaned at less than 13. And so when you made mention of the fact that an 11-year-old child, got a job as a morgue attendant, it hit me because both parents, even at 10 and 13 years when I lost them, I couldn't bring myself together to even go see them lying in state. And then I'm just imagining what it is that an 11-year-old child works as a morgue attendant. This is bone chilling, and this has to stop. And so we've also picked up from what you said about the, mind-blowing statistics of the number of children who are out of education for whatever reason it is at all. And this is something that we intend to address here and see how we can move these things forward. You also made mention of some gaps in employment law, which need some addressing. Thankfully, we have someone here who is a specialist in employment law, Mr. Say, who will be coming up to speak to us shortly, and hopefully he will be able to address that aspect of it. So thank you once again, Milord, for this. We expecting questions to come up at the end of all of the talks by all 4 people. Then we will be able to throw questions out. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So going forward now, we would like to give Mr. Osei the floor to come up and give us what he's got for us this afternoon. Mr. Osei, you have the floor. And please, as much as possible, try to keep it nearer to 10 minutes than 15 minutes. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chidima. It will be a struggle, but I will try. Please, Father Kemi, can you help share my slides? Good afternoon, everyone, once again. Milord, thank you very much. Justice Nyesom Wike, very grateful for the points you made. So I would rather not touch on child labor, seeing that you've elegantly covered the field. I will just chip in one or two things and then move on to the other aspect, which is domestic workers or domestic labor. But just to drop one or two statistics here, as at 2022, the child labor survey conducted in Nigeria in 2022 found out that 24 million Nigerian children were in child labor, were involved in child labor. And so if you have a population of 200 million people, it means that a quarter of your population are involved in child labor. And so if you, I mean, the congruence of data as to what should constitute a child, we would then have to look at the Child Rights Act and the National Policy on Children of 2022, Phase 2, which puts the age of a child, define a child to be someone who is under the age of 18. And also, here you and your points you make about apprenticeship. If you compare with another jurisdiction, for instance, for argument's sake, I like to always compare Nigeria with the UK, since we have the same common law jurisdiction and heritage. In the UK, the school age is 16. You have to be in full-time education or you're in apprenticeship, but then children in full-time education cannot work more than 2 hours during the school week. And that working hours has to be outside the school hours. So that way you are sure that it's a framework that means that children are in school when they're in school. And the only time they work is outside school, and they can only do 2 hours after school hours and then 10 hours over the weekend. So that way you've created a framework that would help provide and protect the children. And then the kind of sector they work in is absolutely restricted. So they can't work in the moral sector, they can't work in the sector that will expose them to alcohol, cigarette, or harmful things that will affect both their health and their mental well-being. And so just wanted to share, expand more on what the justice has elegantly covered. Waiting for Father Kemi to share my screen so I can just go through the slide. If she's not able to do that, let me see if I can then share my screen. Nancy, is it possible for her to share my screen? I thought that was the what we agreed on earlier.
Yes, she'll be sharing your screen.
Okay, all right, great. So like I said, I'll just look through, I mean, the justice has done a good job of taking us through the legal framework for child labor and the inconsistencies. And one of the things which she recommended, which I also agree with, and it was my recommendation, I'm sure the slides will be shared, was that we have to have a congruence within our laws and have a holistic framework for child labor, taking into cognizance the ILO conventions on child labor and working time and child age, minimum working age, and then the various laws that we have under section 49 to 52 and 69 to 60 to 65 Labor Act, as well as the Child Rights Act. Let's have a holistic framework that will manage child labor in Nigeria. I think that for me is very key, and advocacy. And happily we're having this conversation, this part of the advocacy. We have organizations like the Child Labor Surveys that now and again carry out surveys on the incidence of child labor in Nigeria. But I think the National Orientation Agency has to do more. We have to create a safety net or social network for our children. That is one thing that is lacking. So a lot of things that drive some of these things are poverty. The poverty level is atrocious. And so we cannot discuss child labor in the vacuum without looking at the poverty level, because for you to care, that child that is hawking on the street might be the meal ticket of the family, because there's no free health care. So the father or the mother or the guardian is probably ill and can't afford to go to hospital and can't afford to work. So that child hawking while its mates are in school might be the only might be the only meal ticket for that family. So these things we'll have to put in context and find a way to have a practical and realistic approach to dealing with child labor. So let me see. Okay, now, please, can you scroll to slide 14? Let me start with domestic labor framework. Are you able to scroll to slide 14, please? Right. Slide 14, please. 14. Is that it? Let's see. Is that? Can you do a slideshow? So is it fuller screen? Is it possible? Thank you. So the legal framework for domestic labor under Nigerian law is the Labor Act, the Employee Compensation Act, Minimum Wage Act, and the Domestic Workers Convention of 189, the ILO Domestic Workers Convention 189. Just to put it in context, so we understand why the ILO Convention is important in the conversation. The third alteration to the Constitution, specifically Section 254C, allows the National Industrial Court, when it comes to employment, to apply conventions that Nigeria has ratified as law or as international best practices. So it's applied as a law where it's ratified without domestication, unlike every other convention, which under the Constitution by Section 12 has to be domesticated by local laws. But with specific reference to employment, the National Industrial Court can apply conventions or treaties that has been ratified. And Convention 189 was ratified by Nigeria, so it can be applied as law. But even if it wasn't ratified, if Nigeria is a signatory, it can be applied as international best practices, which National Industrial Court also has the power to do under Section 254C. And so when we make reference to some of these conventions, this is a great basis of these conventions. Can you go to slide 15? And if you can you put it on slideshow? It's tidy and it's easier for people to, it's more pleasing on the eyes and easier for people to actually see it if it's on slideshow, if you can. But if you can't, can you move to slide 15, please? Can you move to slide 15, please? So the Labor Act, while it does not expressly make mention or have provisions for domestic workers, the definition of a worker under Section 91, I believe, is wide enough to cover domestic workers, because it has to be a contract of employment for service or for provision of personal service, whether it's oral or in writing. And so I think that, I believe that definition under Section 91 is wide enough to cover domestic workers. And then this section also defines domestic worker to be someone who provides services in a private establishment. So the combined interpretation of those will actually mean that there is a framework for domestic workers, which means that all the provisions of the Labor Act in terms of minimum wage, in terms of working time, in terms of contract of employment, in terms of medical care, would apply to a domestic worker, typically. And Section 65 goes further to give the minister powers to make regulations for the management, employment, and terms and conditions of those employed as domestic workers. So when you read section 65, sections 91, and section 1 and 2 of the Labour Act, the only natural conclusion to come to is that the Labour Act also covers domestic workers. However, the Employment Compensation Act, which replaced the Workmen's Compensation Act, has a provision that defines domestic work as someone who does menial work or maid servant or all that, but excluding those who provide such services as a member of a family. And therein lies the conundrum. The Minimum Wage Act says that everyone who works as a worker or an employee is entitled to minimum wage. So typically, you would expect that those who work as domestic workers should be entitled to minimum wage. But that same Minimum Wage Act of 2025 excludes organizations who employ less than 25 people. So a domestic worker in most times, but most times will work for a family unit. So it then means that if a domestic worker, a maid or a cleaner works for me, I'm not obliged to pay her the minimum wage or him the minimum wage. And I use her because the incidence of those who work as domestic staff from the research carried out by the same child labor survey shows that 67% of those are actually women. And also that 4 million people are involved in domestic work. I think that statistics is wrong. I think there are more. But again, there are a lot of informal transactions for domestic workers that get unreported, and then we suffer also from lack of data. So having looked at it from that point of view, it's clear that there is a legal framework for the management of domestic workers. But the big issue and the big elephant in the cage in the room is the fact as to whether in practice this actually happens. Please, can you go to slide 17, please? Okay, I've touched on this. You can go to slide 18. I've touched on this as well. If you can go to slide 18. Slide 19, please. I've touched on this. Right. Now, the Domestic Workers Convention of 19, please, can you go back to slide 18 here? Convention 198 and Convention 190 are very critical. Like I mentioned, these conventions are relevant because they've been ratified and they are part of Nigerian law. So there is a conflict or contradiction between the Minimum Wage Act and Convention 189. Convention 189 says that domestic workers are entitled to minimum wage, right? Minimum Wage Act says every worker is entitled to minimum wage, but all employers who have less than 25 employees are not obliged to pay minimum wage. So there's a contradiction. So what the Minimum Wage Act has given in one hand is taken with the left hand. It's given with the right hand, taken with the left hand. But again, the Domestic Workers Convention says that all domestic workers are entitled to minimum wage. We need to, how would I put it, bring these laws into Congress so that we'll have a clear position as to what domestic workers are entitled to. And I think because they are workers, they're deserving of their dignity, and the minimum we can do is to pay them the minimum wage. Now, Convention 190 also applies because the definition of workplace under the convention has expanded the workplace to include private homes, and it's no longer the workplace, it's the world of work. So that extension means that anywhere that someone does work is the workplace and is the world of work. And so there's a protection for domestic workers from violence, harassment, especially sexual harassment. There are tales and tales of domestic workers who have been put in the family ways by their bosses or and be harassed. And we have so many tales of people who have been burned and hot water have been thrown on them as domestic workers and all that. This convention should, if implemented, will kind of be a panacea for that. So the next slide, please, slide 19. Slide 19, please.
If you could be rounding up now, Mr. Say, that would be
Okay.
helpful. Thank
I will,
you.
I will just. So, okay, fine. What I would then do is to do a quick comparison with United Kingdom. Now, in the United Kingdom, there's a domestic workers regulations, which means that workers are seen as employees and all the rights of employees in the UK under the Employment Rights Act apply to them. So they are entitled to minimum wage, working time regulation, they're protected from termination and discrimination. They've also gone further, realizing that domestic workers can be imported. And so they have the immigration regulations for imported domestic workers and the Modern Slavery Act. So under those provisions, you can't bring in a domestic worker except the person is over 21. And that person must have lived with you in your country of abode for at least 1 year before bringing the person to the UK. And they cannot stay longer than 6 months. Now, under the Modern Slavery Act, there's a provision against modern slavery, the worst forms of modern slavery and servitude. Recently, in 2025, Lindia Ogabam, a Zambian lawyer, justice, who works with the ICRMT, was actually jailed for servitude of putting her domestic help under servitude. We also know the famous case of one of our senators that was tried under the Modern Slavery Act. What the UK has done is to make it very clear to everybody that whether you're a domestic worker or you are a worker in the formal industry or in the formal sector, the same rights will apply to you because you're deserving of your dignity, you're deserving of the right pay for the quality of work you do, and you're deserving of all the rights that imbue in an employee. And so I think it's one thing we need to think about clearly because the sector is highly informalized in Nigeria. I think that there has to be regulations. We have to be very deliberate and intentional about putting in framework and safeguarding those who participate in the domestic workspace in Nigeria. I think I'll end here so we can then take questions after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Say. I mean, there was just so much to unpack from everything that you've got here for us, but you've also made some mind-staggering revelations in your presentation. I'm hoping that we would have questions bordering on that. Personally, as someone, my background is in data, I have a lot of questions came to mind as you kept talking. So when it's time for the questions, I'll bring that up. But very, 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 very interesting, to me is the fact that our laws seem to, on one hand, give us something, and on the other hand, try to take it away from us. So hopefully with the questions that will come up, mine and others will be able to, unpack that and see what really is the way forward. We have a definition of a child, and then this is also broken down in different places. We have a definition of the Labor Act and the Minimum Wage Act and Employee Compensation Act in one hand, and then it is also being, turned the other way around with another act that also changes things. One of the major questions that came to my mind when you talked about the law that excludes, organizations employing less than 25 people from paying the minimum wage. I'm not saying to answer this now. Is what came to my mind was what percentage of Nigerian employers are actually employing up to 25 people? Talk more of more than. So, I think that's just something we should, that's something to reflect on. So thank you very much, Mr. Say. Please, if we have any questions at all, please put them in the chat box, and then the moderators and the organizers will be picking them up when the time comes, and then we will have our speakers attend to them in due time. Once again, thank you so very much, Mr. Say. So moving right on without further ado, we'll be calling up our next speaker, which will be Mrs. Eliana Martins. Mrs. Eliana, you have the floor now.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity. I commend you all for the wonderful work you're doing, and I thank you for availing me this platform to be able to speak on something so topical, that is right before us as an ill in society. And we all must come together to acknowledge this and to see how we can put hands together to turn it around. So standing on established protocols, I greet you all and acknowledge your presence here and point out immediately that we have, the Workers' Day, we have the Day of the African Child, we have Children's Day, we even have International Day Against Child Labor. And all this, gives us a perfect opportunity to reflect and to consider what are these things that we need to do and to tackle and to put it like right at the front burner so that even as we celebrate all these days, as we reflect, we're able to take proactive steps, to address the issues around us concerning children who are vulnerable, who need guidance, who need care, who need protection. And our reality, we're also talking about our reality here, in Nigeria. And we know that we look around us, we see the poverty, we see the lack of education, easily accessible education that is open to everybody. And we see that a lot of the times, these children come from broken families, either extended families that cannot fully cater to them, or indeed dysfunctional families. They come from displaced communities. We see that sometimes they may not come from all of this, but their families have health challenges. There is need for social support. There is hunger in the land. And so you look at it from the cultural perspectives also and see the burden that places on these children. And children need to step up to support, to learn skills, as it were, to grow and to function as part of the family. So you see what kind of labor do they often go into? We see them as scavengers, going through heaps of rubbish, picking out metal, picking out plastics. We see them as you look to the north, to the east, to the west. All of these children are doing all kinds of interesting things just to earn a quick, to find some money to support their families and to help themselves through life. You see them mining. A lot of them are working in mining pits that are dangerous and injurious to their health. Some are in the agricultural sector, working on plantations, on large farms. Some are laborers in construction work, not to mention the beggars and those hawking through traffic and all of that. Some even go into the parks, the motor parks. They are working as conductors. Some are loaders in the markets, at the bus stops, carrying load, heavy load. Some actually work in industrial setups and are working in hazardous conditions. Some are trafficked, sent away as domestic house help. And what is it that these children face? They face, through that trafficking, slavery, modern day slavery. That is their exposure. They're exposed to drugs. They're exposed to ritualists. They're exposed to bad gangs and cultists. Some of them even turn informants. They are forced to turn informants. Some are brought in and are like child soldiers, used in situations that are not palatable. Some are even exposed to pedophiles. And the resultant effect is they lack education, exposed to bad health, abuse, and trauma. And we see all of this. What is the pattern of abuse that befalls them? We see them as victims of child labor. They're exploited. Their infringement, there's a basic infringement of all their rights. Most of these rights are even denied outright. Meanwhile, they're entitled to life, the right to life, to grow well, to enjoy, to be happy, to be healthy, to be in school, to enjoy basic freedoms, and to be protected. But we don't see this happening. We see physical abuse. They are overworked, they're exhausted, working long hours, exposed to physical harm, from injuries, from hazardous work. They're even beaten, flogged. And we see that a lot of them are even deprived. Even when they work in those industrial sectors, no helmets, no protective gear. We even see poor living conditions in which they're exposed to bad housing, bad sanitation, bad nutrition. They're also exposed to emotional and psychological abuse. Verbally also, they're abused, humiliated, insults, whether in the home, whether outside it, they face all these things, not to mention emotional blackmail and manipulation, threats, intimidation. They are isolated with no contact, no exposure to their friends, basic friends that they can play with, they can have a good time with. They lack some of those basic things. And some of them do not see families for a very long time. They're exploited. It is forced labor. They are unhappy with the long hours, with no pay, under threat of punishment, but they have no choice. Taken away from their homes, no pay, or their documents are confiscated from them. And even when they are paid, very poor compensation. We also see sexual abuse. Some are even forced into prostitution, sexual harassment in homes and in other places. They are coerced and manipulated into all kinds of things because of the imbalance of power at play. And we see these patterns of abuse and exploitation causing severe, long-lasting effects on them physically, emotionally, psychologically. And these are the children that we desire to grow up well, to be healthy. But we all have a role in reducing the prevalence of child domestic labor. We can raise awareness. We can work with communities to raise awareness, to educate families, to educate even institutions, communities, to work with us. We can change attitudes, and show to communities that it is not by you sending off your child to a long off place that they will be helping the family. So we need to be able to address cultural issues and provide alternative values for these communities such that they're able to prioritize children's education. We must promote education actively and ensure that communities, families, children value education. And as we go around and we work and carry out advocacy, we must be able to also empower communities, build capacity, help them to balance so that even if children must learn skills, they are able to balance it off with education and the right choice of work that they can do to be supportive. And then we can also support victims. When these children come, they are rescued. How do we prevent them from going back to these unhealthy situations? And who can lead this effort? I believe that all of us can play an active role in making sure that we tackle this issue head on. And that means that government agencies and ministries, we've talked, my co-panelists have spoken about the law, so I'm not going to go into that, but they've spoken about the law. CRA gives responsibilities, duties. It spells it out very clearly to agencies, to governments. It also gives to parents. It also gives responsibility to parents, even to the judiciary, sets up administrative agencies and processes on what is to be done regarding these children. So the NGOs, the CSO, community leaders, faith-based leaders, schools, institutions, all of us have a role to play. We are able to come up with effective strategies that we can use, and they must be multifaceted, because we cannot just tackle the law, the amendment of the law, without dealing with issues of social support, or dealing with issues concerning welfare support for these people, when we know that poverty is a great issue in our communities, when we know that lack of information, lack of knowledge is a great issue. So we all need to put our hands together and see how, working together, we can, whether from NGOs or community leaders, whatever it is, we have a responsibility to our children. They have a right as provided in the Constitution and in all those laws that lay out protections for them to enjoy those protections? How do we put our hands together? How do we make sure that we're able to bring them out together to work together? Make sure that the protective measures that are there work. Make sure that we're able to help them, even if it is in finding basic solutions. When we look at all the heads of issues around us, how do we tackle it head on? I would like to say that these things are possible. We can work together and put hands together to make sure that the lot of our children is better. Children deserve a right to live and to grow in a happy environment. And even though they can go out there and learn a skill, we must ensure that there is a good practice out there. The laws are well laid out, they are effective, that government has the willpower, not just to enact those laws or to pass those laws, but to also be able to monitor, effectively monitor with these agencies. We can support with research, with innovations, with ways in which we can ensure that the right thing is being done by our children. I would like to stop here and yield the floor so that other conversations can come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Martins. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying so much within a very short time. And, you know, when I was reading your citation, as you were speaking, I had to go back to look at it again. And I absolutely have no doubt about your passion in advocating for vulnerable children. You see, I might be an adult today, but when I heard you speak, it took me back to where I was a couple of years ago, you know, as a child who had lost her parents, who was orphaned very early. So I could relate with so many things you talked about, and seeing that there are people like you who are a strong voice in advocating for what used to be me years ago is very heartwarming. And that tells me that we are making a headway somewhere. I picked up a lot of things from what you said, and which is the holistic nature of what we need to get this working. Because at the beginning of this webinar, I made mention about what we tend to get out of this webinar, which is to unearth, you know, the illegalities around child labor and domestic staffing. But then again, I made mention about the fact that we don't need to lose sight about what our realities are. And when it comes to these realities, one of them is the fact that, you know, the fact that poverty is here with us is a huge, huge, huge reality. And it is something that, you know, we need to deal with. If poverty is not fully dealt with, then all of this law, child labor, domestic labor, and all of that, you know, we'll keep having all these question marks. So thank you very much again, Mrs. Martins. And we will now keep proceeding. We have some questions coming up and some comments around this, and we will take them in due time. Before we call up our next speaker, and then would be fully ready for taking questions and feedback and commentaries, I want to try launching this poll. Hopefully technology allows it work. Okay. So if we could just try responding to this poll. Hopefully, can we see this? Is a poll up? Yeah, so the question is, what do you think is the top barrier to applying existing laws to child labor and domestic employment? Just choose one, the one you think is the top, and I'll just end this when it's 1 minute. So we have 30 seconds now, 31 seconds, counting down to 35 seconds. So when it's 60 seconds, I'd end the poll and would see what the responses are. So far, a good mix of responses. But first is topping the list now is weak enforcement mechanisms. That's what's topping the list. So just keep it coming. We have another 10 seconds before I end the poll. Another 10 seconds. Okay, a good mix. Very good mix. Very good mix. Awesome. So I'll be ending the poll now. Okay. I'll try sharing the results. Okay, can we confirm that we can see the results so far? So we'd see that 59%, yeah, 59% of us feel that we have weak enforcement mechanisms. So we're thinking that it's not about the law here, it's about the enforcement of the law. And then a good 21% telling right up talked about lack of rights and knowledge by employees. And I think we can all relate to this. So hopefully in answering the questions and in going forward with our next speaker, this responses might gauge how we respond to the questions that will come. So without further ado, we want to call on our last speaker now before we now get on to taking comments and questions and reactions. So you have the floor now, Mr. Sani. Elkanah Oge, I see you have your hand up. There will be time for questions if you intentionally have your hand up for a question. But if you don't, please, if you put your hand down, that will be helpful. And one of our ground rules was to keep your microphone muted. So please, if you're here and your microphone is on and you do not have the floor, please keep your microphone muted to help us have a good session. Thank you very much. Over to you now, Mr. Sani.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, please, I can.
Okay, so I think I've listened to everyone, all the great speakers that have spoken, and I really want to thank the NBA for putting this together. And I'm quite glad that this is coming from the this noble body, because we've had challenging times in the past. I'll be speaking more practical to things that we have encountered. I'm very much happy with what the last speaker had said concerning what should be done and what all this in terms of awareness creation, identifying, supporting the victims and the rest of that, which are some of the things that we've been doing at Child Protection Network. As a quick introduction, Child Protection Network is a coalition initiated by UNICEF to serve as a body for both state and non-state actors working to prevent and respond to abuse, violence, and exploitation in Nigeria. So this set the tone for you to understand that we have our members all across the 36 states, including the FCT. And then we've been doing this to respond. But a big challenge. There's always been a big challenge with all of these things. And so I remember very, very well, sometimes I want to pick it because this is the sector. We're speaking with this sector. So I want to pick it from some of the cases that we have gotten to handle. And I remember one time at a very, sometimes ago, about many years back, actually, when we were called upon from somebody who went to a police station and found a child there. And then upon the investigation, the person found out that the child was brought to the police station by a very, 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 very senior legal practitioner. And so this person, this child was engaged by this legal practitioner as a child domestic worker. And so this child worked, and then maybe the child stole, I think they said the child stole about 1,500 naira, according to what we heard from the police. And then this legal practitioner, this senior legal practitioner, brought the child to the court, to the police station to retrieve the money or to retrieve or to also punish the child. And that's, but when we intervened, the moment we got there and we introduced ourselves, the police explained to us and we tried to let them know this is a child domestic worker. And I like what the Milord said concerning the sections 28 and 29, even though it is not clearly, it's not so clearly stated there, but even to a layman, it is clearly stated that no child should be employed as a domestic worker, in the home. And so after having proved, when we said this, so the police was able to, they asked us to come back so that they would communicate with this senior legal practitioner. And lo and behold, before we go back, I must say that the child has been withdrawn. They've taken the child away. The person had come, and took the child away. But because we are partners in progress, we didn't escalate the matter, but we just tried to see what we can do to make it. So this sets the tone for, even for like the poll that you raised, that is it really about weak enforcement? Is it about cultural beliefs? Because many of the perpetrators from the cases we have handled, many of the perpetrators who use children for child labor, or who engage children in domestic work, because domestic work is one of the worst forms of child labor. It's not just another child labor. It's the worst form of child labor, and it's an hazardous labor. So it's not even a labor that a child should be engaged in because of the severity of the work. And even when my Lord was also talking about the child rights, the Labor Act, I remember very well, because we've done a lot of research around this position. We know that the law was also silent. I mean, the Labor Act was also silent at the point when it talked about children and even domestic. It referred to going to the meeting, the permanent secretary making decisions concerning what happens to the child. But back to where I'm going to, like these matters, I mean, this engaging children in child domestic work or child labor are matters that are very, very serious, that it is so culturally into our system that such that people find it very difficult to even say that a child should know. There are some communities, you know, in some states, I wouldn't want to mention any state so that it doesn't look like, because I may not know other states who also have this cultural belief, so I don't want to label any state. But in some states in this country, we have some communities in those states who believe that until a child is sent out, no matter how strong the law is, their belief is that until that child is sent out of that community to go and work somewhere, they see it as a form of development. They see it as a form of nurturing for the child. And so and even for those, because they are readily available to supply. And then there are also people out there who are ready to take on these children. And you know, I also want to bring back to mind another case of a particular child who was also a victim of child labor, but was recruited by another person. But upon recruits, this child in the course of doing the work in the house, this child was engaged in fetching water for the family. And, you know, this child often goes out very, very early in the morning to fetch water. And there's this predator, and there's this person who is this man who appeared to be kind and loving to the man who assists the child by going to, anytime the child is going to the to go to fetch water, who assists the child in sometimes carrying the bucket of water, or maybe even fetching the water, and then support the child to an extent. And at the end of the day, this person used this opportunity to start sleeping, to start having a carnal knowledge of this child, and eventually impregnated this child. And when the matter got to the police station, you know, this child insisted, and this child insisted that she's so much in love with this man, because this is the man that has shown him or her, this is the man that has shown her love over time, because of the attention, concern, and the accompany that the man has always provided to her. So it's at the end of the day, when we had to contact legal practitioners to go, but the case, because it was not a typical case of sexual abuse where these things were, but because it has a connection of child labor, where the family is saying that no, we cannot withdraw this child from this place. The matter was not really pushed as it should, but eventually we insisted on our own, and then used the position of the law to ensure that we do something about it. So it's when this came up that this had to be done. One of the things that I'm looking forward to talking about at this meeting is to also see a situation, because one of the problems we have suffered in the time past is that issues of child labor are never taken seriously. More like the issue of physical abuse, but issue of physical abuse are beginning to gain momentum, and then we are getting, but issue of child labor, because most times people move their attention, we shift our focus from the issues the child is facing, and we move it to the problem of the family. And then we begin to create reasons, generate reasons why this child should be engaged in labor, or why this child should go and work in another family, and why this child should be allowed to do this work in this other family. And even when this child tries to, seek justice or seek support, what comes out from from most people is that this child is being inconsiderate. This child is not recognizing the help that is being offered to her. And so it pains us so much, because even when you try to get, for issues of sexual abuse, the moment we call from legal practitioners, we get support, for example, sexual abuse. But for issues of child labor, it's like all of us, everyone, see it as something, we only talk about it as something being serious, but we don't actually put our energy into ensuring that justice is served, into ensuring that children who are victims of child labor are rescued and rehabilitated, into also ensuring that perpetrators who also do these things are condemned. And I'm hoping that at the end of this session, maybe the MBA can make it as part of the primary rule within the MBA, that any member, because I can say it boldly, that there are so many of the legal practitioners who engage, because of their nature of their jobs, they engage cheap laborers, and by that they engage children in child labor. As domestic workers. And this because they are perpetrators, because they are legal practitioners, it's often difficult for you, because you know that the laws will be maneuvered. The laws will be manipulated rather. And so it's often difficult for us sometimes to push it further. Rather, we use the social approach by ensuring that, okay, as it is, these are the dangers this child is facing. Okay, can you please make amends, or please return the child, even though if we are not taking up this case against you. But if we have an assurance from a body from this noble body, then we can begin to bring these cases forward to this body and say that here and now we have found cases of legal practitioners who are engaging children in their homes as domestic workers. On that note, I really want to thank us thank you for giving us this time, the Child Protection Network, this opportunity to be part of this discussion. Thank you. I will wait for questions and to be answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Mr. Olakunle. You've brought so many things. You've brought reality to the legalities that we've been listening to all the while. You see, so you found a way to make these things, look so real, which is what they are to us, and even giving examples, the fact that, one way or the other, even those who are in this meeting are culprits or victims, whatever it is that we want to call it, of this act of child labor and unethical domestic staffing. It's ingrained and enshrined in our system. So thankfully, there are a lot of questions that we have now. I just hope we'll have enough time to answer the questions. I see some hands up. Hopefully we'll be able to come round to that, but we have some questions in the chat box, and when we laid our ground rules earlier, we mentioned that we will be using the chat box as our main major medium of communication here. So please, I see all our hands up, but I would like to start picking the questions from the chat box first, and then we will, when we have the time, hopefully come around to those who would want to lend their voices in person. So one of the first questions that one of the first questions I have up here is about domestic workers experiencing harassment, violence, and other forms of degradations in their places of work. So the question is, how do they seek redress or help? Bearing in mind that most, if not all of them, are financially constrained to employing the services of lawyers to get them out of these situations. So I think this question would be most suited for Mr. Say, but if you feel otherwise, please, you could also call up any other member of the panel to take up the question, try answering the question. So Mr. Say, I think this should be your fault. So how do domestic workers who feel that they are being harassed or facing any kind of violence or being unethically engaged, how do they seek redress without the huge costs that comes with having to employ a lawyer?
Thank you, Chibli. Thank you very much. I mean, this is one thing, harassment in the workplace, which extends to the world of work. It's something I'm very passionate about. I've done quite a bit of work in this area. And like I said, Convention 190 covers everybody and protects everybody from harassment, sexual harassment, violence, and all that in the world of work. It depends on where you are. So for instance, for Lagos State, there are a lot of, Lagos State actually has a domestic violence unit, and Lausa is around the 7-Up area, Elephant House area. They are very, very proactive. They are very, very active. There are a lot of non-governmental organizations who are involved in advocacy and defending rights of people. And so, like I said, it depends on where you are located. A lot of people have come up to me personally to say, can you assist with this? And we do a lot of pro bono work in this area as well. So there are firms, you can even speak to FIDA. You can speak to the NBA. They have a list of lawyers who can defend you pro bono. And so that's why what I always push for is advocacy, because people don't know that these channels and avenues exist. So what we need to do more is to push these various channels of redress, because the Convention 190 is very clear that governments must provide a channel for redress and compensation. So it's not a matter of policy, it's a matter of law now. So you can meet any of these NGOs, you can meet the NBA, you can meet Lagos State government if you're in Lagos State. I do know that Ogun State and Oyo State also have similar organizations, state-run organizations. So there's a lot there a lot of mechanism to serve as a redress mechanism for people, especially if you can't, for those who can't afford it. But first goal will be to go to the NBA. If you are in any state you are, go to the branch of NBA around you. They will direct you in case you don't know how to get to government organizations or other bodies.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Say, for that concise answer. And this next question, I think, will be well suited for Milord. But if you feel otherwise, Milord, please, you could pass on to any other of the panelists. And the question is, how do we address situations where the mothers or parents are the ones exposing the children to these dangers directly? Are there mechanisms in place to remove these children from such parents?
So I would advocate that the best place for any child to be is with their parents. But if we now find that they're being used for child labor, the thing is we don't even have the facilities really, for where to keep them. We're supposed to have safe homes and places where people who are abused are kept. A lot of states don't have that. Some states even let me just leave it at that. Some states don't even have family courts at all. So they don't even have a place where they can go to litigate or just, unbundle what their issues are. So it's a big problem. We need infrastructure in all the states of Nigeria. we do need. There should be at least a division of a family court, and that is really to say the least. And there should be also safe homes. You know, some children are brought before the family court, and they're supposed to be given some protection from, especially if it's abuse, and these children are in the home where the abuser is also resident. They have nowhere to go, really. But some states still have that. But if we have the facilities everywhere in Nigeria, I'm sure we'll be able to leave these children, keep them somewhere that will be safe, comfortable, and be homey, and then they can stay there while they are waiting for a better circumstance that can be arranged for them. So it's really sad where we are, that not much can be done. And it's sad when the parent is the one that is the abuser, who should be the protector of that child. But otherwise, I will advise that children should befriend their parents, as parents should do the same, so that if they have any abuse from any other person apart from the parents, they can express to their parents, who can now take charge of the situation and see how they can resolve whatever the issue may be. But where it is the parent that is the one who is putting them through all of this, and like we said, different speakers have said it, poverty is actually the bane of this situation. It does not allow, because I mean, you have a child who is able to stand up and carry a tray on their head, and you're so poor, you don't maybe have any means of income, and you're working yourself, maybe doing something, and then the child is doing nothing. I don't know. Some parents look at it like it's a waste of time and resource, that the child should be helping, and children really should help. That's part of their responsibilities, even in the Child's Rights Act. They should help their family in any way that they can. Even the country and their society, everywhere, they should use their skills, to make things better. But in the instance of poverty, when they are looking for a means to survive, they look and they feel like there's no other way out. So we will pray, really, that things should get better in Nigeria, that minimum wage should be increased to much more than what it is, for there to be job opportunities for parents to find good work to do, as opposed to doing anything outside really the workforce, decent workforce. And then our children now will be comfortable to go to school while their parents are there fending for their needs, and they're not having to do work like adults. But, it's sad when it's the parent that is the one, doing that. But sometimes, I mean, I don't want to say you can't really blame them, because, I mean, the circumstances does not allow for them to just let the child just be a child when
Yeah.
there is a lot of suffering in the family. It's really sad.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Milord. Thank you. It's just sad that we are neither here nor there. Something to think about would be, are there states that already have this in question? And then could this be transferred? So if there's none in your state, can you move to another state? Just something we could think about going forward. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I want to give, I've just been informed that I could give some audience to those who have their hands up so they could speak in person. So I want to give the floor now to Mr. Elkanah Oge, a chief magistrate in Rivers State, to give his comments and observations or questions. You have the floor now, sir.
Right. Thank you. Good afternoon. The moderator, thank you very much. Let me also seize this opportunity to thank Milord, my boss, the Honorable Justice Wike. I thank God for the privilege he gave me to work in the Rivers State Family Court as a pioneer magistrate. My point is, you see, the concept of protecting the child is a huge concept. Several people have said a lot of things. I also have a contribution I wanted to make, but I just want to point out this fact that the issue of protecting the right of the child and also preventing the children being engaged in child labor, I think touches more on the aspect of the social, economic, and cultural right in the United Nations Convention. And to me, that is the bulk of what government is required to do in protecting the child. Children, it has been observed, are the, I think, a main consumer of the social services of any state. And now, if we begin to look at it from the perspective of other nations that have advanced in the manner they protect and take care of their children, you would observe that they have an underlying social structure that is at work. And that is what makes the issue of protecting the child, particularly on the issue of engaging the child in child labor, is so successful. Now, in our own system, you observe that children don't just get involved in child labor, because one of the natural tendencies of a child is to get involved in play and in leisure. But because of the economic pressures around a childhood, these are the things that exposes the child to issue of child labor. And so the fundamental issue is that government needs to realize, and government needs to invest more in the area of the social structure. A social welfare structure needs to be reinterrogated, and government needs to look into it, because that is a major area. I was involved recently in a conversation where we discussed on particularly this aspect of protecting the child, but we're looking at it on the health rights of the child. And we looked at it from the perspective of the school-age children. And we observed that about half, Nigeria is about 250, the population of 225 million people, and about 46 or 48% of this population ranges between children between 0 and 17, which means ours is a population that is made up of more, younger, children. And so if we got this understanding, government need to focus on investing in the social structure, ensuring that social amenities are available, schools are made available, improving on the economy of homes. I tell you, under the child right law, leisure and play, it has been identified as one of the natural rights of the children, and you give it to them. But you see, when the family is in need of basic necessities that can support the child does not have any other thing but to engage in any meaningful thing that would help the family. I think that is where the challenge of having more children engage in child labor is. And another aspect of it is that, yes, we have established, we have domesticated the child right law in the country and in our various states, but you see, the facilities, both under the law and as those provided in the international convention that will aid in helping to drive this, are not in place. Take, for instance, some institutions that are required to be established under the law, like on the national level and the state level, the Child Right Implementation Committee. How many states has it? And if they are there, how many of it are effective? And then such committee, it is required that the members of this committee are supposed to be drawn from various ministries, which are supposed to be the driving ministry. All those things are not there. And not easy. We have the family court. That's good. Before now, there are many others that the family would have gone to the court to make, but they couldn't because of the limitations of the Matrimonial Causes Act. But thank God for the coming to be of the family court, which now has empowered magistrates to make most of those laws. And we can see that for those who have known, they have been coming to court, and then children, court have been issuing orders that are helping to protect the child. But you see, though we've made progress in this area, there is much more that we need to do. Then, okay, but just before I'm stopped. And the another aspect is the aspect of popularizing these policies. I understand that most times in my interactions with lawyers, I'm an administrator, yeah, I understand many people are not aware of the provisions of the law. Even those who know that the law exists, they don't even know the details and the innovative provisions of the law that are meant to protect the child. And even when they know some of the facilities provided under the law that are supposed, to be used in protecting the child. So my point as I've summed up, is that first, government, we need to have a kind of a reorientation, understanding on the importance of the social structure and how government need to invest in it and build up structures that will help to drive this and take the children off the street. Two, we need also government need to intervene in providing the required facility that will, okay, let me give you an example. Several times, children have been taken off the street, brought to family court on issue of children doing begging, on children courts, maybe where they are domestic person who have taken them from the village and have abused them. And when we made order, we have taken some of them to safe home. Most of them are in safe home now, but safe home don't have facilities. They're just there eating food. They're not going to school. They're not undergoing any vocational training. And one of, fundamentally, the right to survival and development are the basic right of a child. You can give a child food, but if the child is not trained to develop his mentality and to learn a vocation, and the child passes the stage of childhood and gets into adult, is a damaged child. So the focus, these things are holistic. So, but majorly,
thank you, Mr. Ekana. Sorry, I'll have to
finally, I advocate NGO need to get involved. Government can't do it alone because the problems are huge and challenging. The NGO need to get involved and help government. In many developing countries where these things are working, I think the NGO didn't just leave it for government alone. They had to come in, lawyers, by engaging in what is called a public interest litigation. When you win a case against the government, you go after the AG, who will advise the chief executive, please, this is what the law provides, implement it. And if AG and the law officer of the state does not act, you can take up a contempt proceeding against the AG, and no attorney general will be willing to do that. So the attorney general also having option, but to pressure the chief executive to make those things, to provide those structures that will aid in protecting the child. So that's my little contribution to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Oge. That was very detailed. There was just so much to unpack there. And one thing that has clearly stood out in all of these conversations is the fact that poverty is a big issue. And the number two thing that stood out again is the fact that we seem to have a data or number problem in Nigeria. And that brings me to my next question, which has been put in the chat. There are a couple of questions, but one of the attendees has asked a question that I also wanted to ask, which is, how do we know that a child is not in school? Because from the numbers we've heard so far, it's been ranging in millions, showing that a good number of our population are children, and a huge percentage of those children are not in school. So I don't know. I think this question should go to Mrs. Eliana, but if you feel it's suitable to someone else, you could please feel free to pass the button. How do we know that a child is not in school? Do we have statistics that track childbirth and when they are in the key stage of academics to know that they are not in school? Is there a way for us to know?
Okay, I think that's a difficult question because it's difficult to track. If we were able to track kids out of school, I think government would have done a lot more in terms of ensuring that, because you see, we have laws that insist that you should be in school, and then monitoring and ensuring that they're in school is the challenge, even in terms of, if we had a system where we knew where everybody resided, if we had a system where we knew what age groups, wherever you live, but registration of families, the details of how the children are growing and all of that comes back to the social measures, that social and welfare measures that should be put in place and enforced by government. And if families are able to connect to that, then it's easy to track. It's easy to track and say, okay, you have children, 4 kids within this age range. So at this age range, they're supposed to be in school. How come they're not in school? Also, if you're policing very well, effectively, you should be able to say, okay, agents from social welfare are going around, like inspectors, for instance, children hawking in the morning, in the afternoon, when you know that ordinarily they should be in school, you'll be able to say, okay, these children will be taken from you. And unless you can show, they should even be able to do a house to house to find out what is going on. Neighbors should be able to even say, we are reporting. So what are the channels for reporting? What is the channel for knowing and tracking effective? And that is why I believe that this is a holistic thing. We need to tackle it. Everybody must be involved. So yes, we'll put in place the right regulations and all of that to be wholesome, to be effective, but we also need to inspect, we need to monitor, we need to be able to track. And then when we do that, the responsibilities of the different institutions, the officers that need to do, because government too does not have the willpower. It's one thing to pass a law, but you need to have the willpower to implement those laws and to give it the necessary backbone. As has been said here, even the institutions lack capacity. So even when you take those kids off the streets, what do you do with them? How are you making sure that even if you bring them, you take them through one rehabilitation program, they are not able to go back? We're able to see that there are countries like Brazil, like Mexico, like India, that have social welfare programs that are able to, when these kids are taken, we see them, you're able to keep in check, you monitor them, you effectively look at them and say, okay, because we saw that you had defaulted before, this family, we're keeping track of you. We investigated this family and we saw clearly that their needs are social, their needs are welfare needs, and we as a government are able to support. And then you're also able to support the families by saying, okay, for keeping these children in school and showing us that they are in school, we can monitor and evaluate this thing. We're going to additionally give you some more monies, you know, to ensure that we're being supportive. So the programs that we need to come up with that would involve support, whether from private sector, helping us to accomplish this, because, you know, companies too have a way in which government can pull them in, and we can see private sector measures being put in place under corporate social responsibility. They are able to come up with programs and policies that help communities in which they work in to tackle these social welfare needs, so that it's not just about government handling social welfare needs, you know.
Thank you very much.
Because the aim is to prioritize the child protection.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then I'll just read out something that in the chat. I don't know that, you know, it's about this, and it's from Ikoro, and he said, in Abia, if a child is seen out of school, they pick up the child, and when the parents come for the child, they face the music. And this is coming out from Abia State. I don't know what the framework is, what the template is that works there. So thank you, Ikoro, for sharing that. And if that template could be borrowed from other by other states, probably that will be helpful. And okay, I have another follow-up question, Ms. Eliana, and I would like you to just give an answer to this in 90 seconds, if it's possible, you see. And you see, how do we rank a situation where the parents are working extremely hard to put food on the table for the entire family, and the child is also helping the family with maybe hawking? Do we still call this child labor? Just in 90 seconds, please.
Well, I think everything needs to be balanced. Hawking has to be, where are they hawking? Are they hawking in protected neighborhoods? Because we're talking about the well-being of the child, care and protection. So where exactly are they hawking? What are they hawking? So I think those are determinants. If they're hawking on the streets, then it's not okay. If they are hawking within communities that they reside around, do you understand? And it's not a dangerous area, then it puts it in a better context for children to be able to support in those things. But because it's difficult, even in Lagos, we face that situation where we were trying to say that no hawking. But, you know, parents will tell you that it's impossible for them not to hawk, because there are ways they cannot pay for stalls where children will sit and sell. So how do you balance these things out is the greater question. And if the welfare of the child is the determining factor, then we've got to be able to say, okay, you can do these things within these parameters because this is safety, this is protection.
Thank you very much. I think that sums it up. There's need for us to, you know, have a balance of this. And someone shared a perspective here that I think would be nice to share. Alero Akeredolu said, child labor benefits many of us elites who have used them at one time or the other. Therefore, we cannot speak boldly on the issues without condemning ourselves. I think this calls for deep reflection more than condemnation or critiquing. We have a lot of introspection and self-reflection to do. Okay, I want to pass on this next question to Mr. Olakunle, and please feel free to pass it on to anyone else if you feel it's not your strong thought. How many states in Nigeria domesticated the Child Rights Act? Do you have an idea? And what is the impact of the non-domestication of this act? Because you made mention, I think you made mention of a time you had a child in the police station who was being accused of one thing or the other, and then there were some good reasons given why it wasn't driven down. So how many, do you have an idea how many states in Nigeria have domesticated this act, and how is it being enforced, and what's the impact of it not being domesticated at all?
Okay, so thank you very much. From information we have from reliable sources across the country, I mean, quoting the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs, quoting UNICEF, and many other UN partners that are also involved. All the states in Nigeria, as of today, have all domesticated the Child Rights Acts. So we have all the states, all the 36 states have either maybe it is called the Child Rights Law in their state, or it is called Child Protection Law, particularly in the northern states. Most of them change it to Child Protection Law rather than call it the Child Rights Law. So we have that in all the 36 states. However, I must mention that some of those laws are not really adequate. But we have been able to cross the first hurdle, which is the domestication. Now it is now for us in the space. What we are now advocating for is to review those laws in those states and then make it something that is more protective for children, especially to be in tune with the realities of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if any of the panelists that would want to add to that. So is it truly domesticated? What's the impact of it not being domesticated? Is there any other panelists that would want to add to that?
I am Chidima. Thanks very much. For me, it's never been about the laws, right? It's never been about the laws, because even under the fundamental principles, under Section 17 of the Constitution, there is an obligation on government to protect the rights of children. Even under the fundamental human rights of children, well, that's Chapter 4. It's always been a case of the political will to implement these rules. We can keep promulgating laws, but it's of no point if those laws are not implemented. If there's no framework for implementation, if there's no practical guideline to implementation, taking into consideration our cultural and peculiar nuances, because we cannot implement this in a vacuum. We have to take into consideration our cultural and peculiar situations. And so it's I kind of look more to see what framework we put in place to have these things that we already have implemented. And if we can start from that, perhaps we'll be in a better place. But to keep, the states will, it's a legislative duty. They will implement, they will domesticate the laws. And good thing, I'm happy they've domesticated it in all the states. It's a good thing. But it is not just about domestication, it's about implementation. We really need to put the mechanism in place to start implementing these things.
Thank you very much, Mr. Say. And this next question, I think, would fall under your purview. And it says, I understand now that there are agencies that hire out domestic workers. Call them temporary agencies or anything. Can they be held responsible for child labor violations or unethical domestic practices?
But of course, yes. Why not? I think, and this is part of the implementation I'm talking about.
Are they lawful at all in the first place, though?
Well, I mean, Labor Act allows recruiters. So you have a recruit license, you can recruit for yourself or for other people. So they will come under that aegis of having a recruiter's license to recruit employers for other people. But what we then need to insist is that in recruiting house helps for people, you must insist that the basic minimum is done. Health checks, minimum wage, living conditions, and all that. But there's no framework for that. No, I gave you the instance of the framework for domestic workers in the UK. You must provide accommodation for them. If you provide meal for them or accommodation for them, you can take out a portion of it as paying for the accommodation, but you must pay the minimum wage after that. So implementing, if we have a system that implements this and goes after this, but again, if you look at the Ministry of Labor, they don't even have the manpower to ensure that the proper things are done with the recruitment agencies. So how do we then begin to deal with this? So yes, the law is there that you can recruit for people, but what happens is that these people must they must recruit and follow the process. Okay, have health insurance for them, make sure they have medically checked, make sure they get a minimum wage, and make sure they live under human and humane conditions, and that their dignity is protected. But so again, I go back to it, boils down to implementation.
Thank you very much. You see, we keep making these references to very organized systems like we have in the UK. And I think what Ms. Eliana also that mentioned about Mexico and other areas like that. It's nice when we make these projections, you see, but the truth is, are we at par with them, really? Can we really make these comparisons? I'm not saying we can't, I'm just asking a question for us to think about. And then this brings me to a next question. This is coming from me. I'm not legal, but when the presentations were going on, and anyone can take this question, there were issues. There were statistics that came up around the employment laws, where if an organization employs less than 25 people, then they are exempted from the minimum wage issues. Now, this also tells me again that this law would only catch up with those who are in the private sector, because I can't think of any government organization that will be employing less than 25 people. Now, if this catches up the more with the private sector, and then I don't have the actual stats because numbers is a problem with Nigeria, really. I deal with numbers a lot. But I know that a greater percentage of our workforce in Nigeria are actually employed by the private sector. Where does that leave the issue of minimum wage, with us? And how do we harness these things? How do we bring them together? Because when we say the minimum wage is this amount, we know in reality that it's only those who work for the government that get that. What happens to those in the private sector? How do we get this to marry themselves?
Right. I think I was the one that raised that issue. So I will start. So for me, for starters, I think it's a misnomer. If you say this is a minimum wage, what you're saying is that you've plotted the indices to mean that every person can survive on this minimum. So it's actually a living wage, right? So ideally, it should apply to everyone. If you cannot afford to pay it, then don't employ. If you cannot afford to pay it, then don't employ. For me, that's the starting point. But the other point is, how did we even arrive at this minimum wage? Can 70,000 as minimum wage actually take anybody home in today's economy? What are the bases for arriving? Is it just a question of negotiation or a question of hard empirical fact that hey, you can pay X amount of money every month for your medical, for this, and then you still have something to save or to live on and survive if you have an illness? And these are tough questions. So for me, you say every employer is entitled to a minimum wage, and you then say that those employing less than 25 are exempt from paying it. Nigeria is mostly made up of informal sector. And the informal sector and small, medium business enterprises mean that you might not even employ up to 25. So what then happens is that majority of those who really need the minimum wage don't even earn it. You've removed it from bracket. Those who really need it, really earn it, don't have access to earning it. So really, like I said, you are giving in one hand, and then you're giving the right hand and taking with the left hand. So we have a conundrum. So how do we resolve this? For me, if you're saying every employee is entitled to minimum wage, then everybody that works under a contract of service should get the minimum wage, regardless of the number.
Just as a follow-up to this, not taking the words away from your mouth, what should the government do? What should the government do, especially since this issue largely occur in the private sector? What steps can you prefer? And this is not just you, Mr. Osei. Anybody else could contribute to this. What is the remedy?
I think the remedy, firstly, I think the wording of the Minimum Wage Act of 2024 is actually wrong. There should be no exemption. There should be no exemption. And like I said, I've had this even in MBA, where there's a minimum, the remuneration policy. If you can't afford to pay minimum wage, you don't have to employ someone. And so first thing to start with is, going forward, I'm sure the next 3 years we'll have another minimum wage. One of the things that the legislature will be pushing for is to remove that clause that restricts minimum wage to only those who employ 25 and above. Let's start from there.
Okay.
If we have that, then let's start from there. Yeah. I think it's something NGOs should all push for. We should all push for as lawyers to ensure that clause is removed from the next Minimum Wage Act. All
right. Thank you very much, Mr. Osei. If anyone else has something to contribute, I'll give you the floor. But now I'd like to give the floor to Mrs. Inime Agoma. You have the floor, please, ma'am.
So much. Good evening to everyone. I've enjoyed all the discussions thus far, and I really want to say that I appreciate all that's been going on. Now we talk about social welfare issues. The speakers have done marvelously well, and I commend them. I want to say something, that whilst we are planning for more safe homes, more family courts, and other institutional support, there is a need for us to think of what would happen to those children 3 months away from those institutions. I know that the United Nations has always advised for us to ensure that these children are settled into family settings. So that's one headache we have to add to what we are discussing. If a child stays in a safe home, even if you provide educational facilities or some form of vocational training for the child, that is not a home. And that's the reality. They are cold, they are there, it's run by nurses and matrons and all of that. So we also have to think of what plans do we have for these children? How long should they stay in these institutions before they are settled into families that will accept them? Let's not forget that the Child Rights Law talks about the best interest of the child at all times. Most of these children that come to the safe home are children that have come for the reason of protective custody. They're not there to serve punishment, or they're not there because they did anything. They're there for a reason of protective custody. Sometimes their homes are no longer welcome to them. Are they going to be in the safe home or the children's home forever? So I think it's one headache we should add to all our discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You've raised a very thought-provoking question. I'm going to take one more question, and then we'll take the final poll, and then we'll be rounding off this webinar that I believe has been very insightful and impactful, as I promised from the beginning. And this question is open to anyone who would want to take it. In a scenario where a child is willingly given out to a family by her parents to train in school and by extension to live with that family, I mean, this is very common in our society, can that arrangement be said to be child labor? Any of the panelists, please?
Okay. Thank you very much. I really, really love that question because this is this is what we try to encourage, because this is protective. This is providing a safe place, because and this is also aligning with the UN guidelines on alternative care of children, which Nigeria has also have in place now. I mean, we have the national guidelines for the alternative care of children. I mean, so this is quite encouraging. This is, I mean, this is already, this question is more like echoing what was going to be my closing notes. That yes, we would always, there will always be situation of families where poverty, where they will not be able to take care, or maybe they will not be available to take care of their children. And we have the wherewithal. We can provide this platform, this opportunity, and take them in. All we just need to do is go through the legal process. Because even when you want to take legal process in terms, I mean, the formal process, so that the child can be documented, because it also keeps you safe as a person who have the child in your custody, because anything can happen to the child eventually. In child protection, we say, think the unthinkable. I mean, imagine the unimaginable. Because if you keep the child without any formal documentation, and the child, yes, even though you are helping, and the child ends up very sick or dead, then it could become something negative. So once it is documented, the government is aware. I mean, without you paying any fee, you are they know that this child, you are taking care of the child, and you are helping government to keep children off the streets. So this approach is very, very encouraging, and this is something that we need to encourage a lot of our people to go to emulate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd want to add a caveat. I'm not a lawyer, but then that is if that child is put in school while they are also giving out to that family. Would I be wrong or right in saying that? Yes or no? Mr. Lakunle?
I need to say something at this juncture.
Yes.
Would you be right
Okay.
or wrong? The whole idea, like our distinguished speakers have, noted, is the best interest of the child. Will that child be going to school and at the appropriate age? Would you, a person who has invited a child into the house because they feel they can offer education, actually letting that child go to school and get an education in the same place where the children of the home are also going to school? Is there a demarcation? Does the child feel safe and happy and welcome in that home? Does the child feel like the child belongs in that home? If one is able to see children from a household and differentiate between the ones who were given birth to in that home and another who came into the home, then we are missing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think
that answers that, yes.
as well.
So before we round off, which we should be doing now, we have one more question. And if I don't take this, I think Mr. Cyril John is going to have my head. So how do we stop the Almajiri syndrome, which has over the years been weaponized in northern Nigeria via religion? This is going to be our final question, and then we take our poll. Anyone could attempt this, and please, in 60 seconds, how do we address this system that has been weaponized?
Hi, Chidima, thanks. I think we need to go back to the basics again with this. Jonathan, in his time, loved him or like him, started the Almajiri School initiative. If we can get the students back to school, because again, child labor, as defined by the ILO, is something that disrupts the ability of children to go opportunity to go to school. And so the Almajiri system kind of does that, but they will argue, people will argue with you that it's a form of schooling on its own, right? Schooling doesn't have to be formal, that you say to use a form of schooling on its own. But we know the ills and the dangers that they face in doing that, as opposed to a formal or semi-formal institution or structure where they are taught and where they learn, even if what they have to learn has to do with their religion. But I think we need to go back to that basics again and see how, again, it boils down to political will, and it boils down to the political selfish interest of our politicians as well, because that also helps them, it aids them, and it uses as a tool and weaponize it. Yeah, so that's my view on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Seni. Please, if you have your microphone on, kindly keep it on mute.
I don't mind just to make an appeal. Can I add to what the last speaker just said? Okay,
Yes,
so I would like to say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being an Almajiri. Almajiri means that you are a scholar, an Islamic scholar. That's who you are. To the person who is your teacher. And then the teacher who is learning from somebody else is an Almajiri to that leader who is teaching him, and he's teaching other Almajiris. So Governor Sule actually said he too has been an Almajiri in times past. And I mean, if all Almajiris can be like Governor Sule of Nasarawa State, is there anything wrong with that? That is positive. But the thing is, parents send their children to the Islamic school and they just abandon them. They don't make any provisions for them for food, for clothing, for payment of rent or whatever it is that they are, I mean, the accommodation and stuff that they need there to sit at the feet of that master or teacher and learn from the person. That's where the problem is. Parents not funding for their children. But if they do that, you will see that there will be nobody sent to the street. The teachers send them to go to beg so that they can have the meal for the next, have money to make or get the next meal. And that's what it's about. If not, they should not be on the street begging. They're begging because they don't have the whatever it takes to cater to their needs. That's what the problem is. So parents should be more responsible, or in the stead of that, the government, who is the parent of each and every one of us anyway, should step into that and take care of these children so that they don't have to go to the street. And I dare say that even if something like that is worked out or arranged, these people, maybe because of their hunger for more money, can still tell these children to still be on the street. So even the people who are giving the lessons should be cautioned. They should not send those children out. And if the government makes provision for them, then we will not see them roaming the street.
Thank you very much, my lord. Thank you so much. That makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, my perspective about Almajiri has just shifted a little bit. I appreciate you for that. Erima Orie, we have your hand up and we just are about to round up now, but we want to give you 30 seconds to say whatever it is that you have, and thank you, just as we are rounding up.
Thank you so much, and thank you all the speakers for your very wonderful thoughts and presentations. I just want to quickly say that there are basic things that we must look at. The fact that the children are what we are seeing is a failure of the system. Whether the child is in a home or is adopted or living with a relation or whatever, what we are seeing is a failure of the system. The government must have the political will. I put it on the chat, but I observed it was not mentioned. The government must have a political will to stop child labor by developing a sustainable welfare scheme that will make it possible for parents and relations to be able to cope with the circumstances of the time. Sometimes you pick up a child, you do not have any bad intention to maltreat the child, but through twists and turns, you just find that you are not coping in maintaining that child. What do? You cannot send back the child back because the child is actually better off where she is, but meanwhile, there's no food, there's no welfare system. So, and the child begins, once there is hunger, you cannot control the child who is hungry. Give him or her ways to sell in the market. and the market is not moving, he will cross any boundary to see that it's sold, because he will need food. He will need to go to bed with, he doesn't want to go to bed with an empty stomach, and he wants to help the parents. So the issue is to have a functional, sustainable welfare scheme that parents can fall back on, that the society can fall back. Whether you abroad, if you don't have a job, you have a minimum that you can collect from government and move on. That way you can take care of your dependents. Is it that they do not have hunger in abroad? No, hunger has no location, has no boundary. So that is my own take. For us to do this, government must demonstrate clear political will to stop child trafficking or child labor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping that very, very brief. And so we've just come back to where we started at the beginning, which is the fact that poverty is at the pivot, the crux of all of our issues when it comes to this discourse. And secondly, the lack of will on the part of the government to enforce our already existing laws. Hopefully, there will be a lot to take away from this discourse and chew on, and then we'll see some changes. So I'm going to take this final poll. Now, this is not something to put on a slate, but something to just give us a thinker, just to gauge our thoughts about what we think. And so the poll is about what should be the most serious consequence for engaging in child labor for whatever reason at all. What should be the most serious consequence? What do you think? So I'll leave this poll on for 60 seconds, and then I would like to see what our thoughts are on them. Should they be fines, prison time, blacklisting from public offices, mandatory rehabilitation programs, or no consequence at all? I mean, we have all given good reasons why some sort of child labor should be there. So no consequence is an answer. So what do we think? Okay, we have another 30 seconds. Please keep your answers coming in. A very good mix here, very competitive from what I can see. Oh, okay. No clear winner. Keep your answers coming. We have another 20 seconds to go before the poll closes. So, all righty. Okay, I'm going to be ending the poll now in 2, 3, 1, end the poll. All right, so I'll just share the answers now. So as we can see, it's a very close tie between prison time, fines, and mandatory rehabilitation program. So I think those of us who are in situations where we can influence our laws a lot would see what we've seen what our thoughts are here about this. And I think that we should leave this place thinking about how do we make our systems stronger? How do we make our current laws enforceable before we start thinking about how to create new laws? And at this juncture, I would like to welcome Mrs. Nancy Obinwa, the committee chair, to give us the closing remarks as we bring this webinar to a close today. Mrs. Obinwa, please.
Thank you very much, MD. You've done a fantastic job. And I'm here to give a vote of thanks to our distinguished panelists, as well as everybody here who's contributed, even just with your presence. Thank you so very much, our distinguished panelists. Your expertise, insights, and the response you gave to the various questions have truly enriched our understanding of the laws and realities on child labor and domestic staffing. We are grateful for the time and effort you've invested in sharing your knowledge with us, and your passion and dedication have made this webinar an invaluable experience for all of us. I will particularly want to thank my Lord, the Honorable Justice Mrs. Eberechi Suzette Nyesom Wike, Justice of the Court of Appeal, and the Nigerian Association of Family Court Judges and Magistrates and Practitioners Presidents. Clearly, your work in the area of childcare law is a calling, and you have continued to rise to the occasion and deliver outstandingly. Thank you so much for leaving everything else to prepare for today and to be here with us all through the time, sharing from your wealth of knowledge and experience. My CVP, Mrs. Eliana Martins, thank you so very much. FIDA is my primary constituency. That's the International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA Nigeria. Thank you. This organization has continued to promote the rights of children, amongst other objectives. And today we've seen it clearly in her delivery, what she is about. Mr. Peku, my brother and my friend, thank you. I would say that you are one of the lawyers that has stayed true to his area of specialization and has continued to gain ground, and that's employment law. Thank you for what you have shared today. I appreciate the efforts that you've put into creating such an informative and engaging content in the slides. Everyone is asking to have a copy, and we'll make sure that is available to all participants. Thank you, Osi. Mr. Sani, thank you for your contributions as well. Very practical. Your work in safeguarding children's rights is really noted and appreciated. Protecting the vulnerable group clearly is not just a work for lawyers. Non-lawyers have shown that they have the passion, the commitment to also engage in that work. Thank you. I also want to thank my amiable section chair, Mrs. Boma Alabi, SAN. Thank you for your support and seeing to this webinar taking place today. I thank also the Secretariat, and the Secretariat is like a one-woman squad. Fadekemi, you're just synonymous with Secretariats. Thank you for your commitment and availability to serve. I'm so grateful that you've been doing all that work behind the scene. I appreciate you. And I thank the Family Law and Human Rights Committee as a whole and the officers who have done so much as well behind the scenes to see that today's webinar is taking place. And I want to say a success. I thank again the moderator for today's session. I mean, you've done an excellent job. Thank you so very much. You shared from your own personal experience, and that's huge. Thank you for keeping this going and lively. And to all the participants, thank you so very much for honoring this invite. I mean, we started with over 100 people, and as at now, we are still over 100. I mean, if you stayed this long in this webinar, then you clearly are passionate about what we are talking about. And I thank you so very much. Everyone who's contributed in the chat box, whether with a question or contribution, I appreciate everything that's been said so far. Thank you, Mrs. Akere Dolu, Mrs. Inime Aguma. I'm so glad you're here today and that you made that contribution as well. At the time when you were the Commissioner for Social Welfare and Rehabilitation in Rivers State, I think it was just a round peg in a round hole. Your work there was very impactful. And today you're here contributing again and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Thank you so very much. I also noted there was a comment you made in the chat box. We couldn't read it out. That had to do with the contribution of Mr. Olakunle, where a child was happy to be sexually involved with somebody who was helping her. A child doesn't have the capacity to consent to a sexual act, so it was just wrong. She was taken advantage of. That was what you highlighted in the chat box, and I just needed to say it out now. So as we just round off, I thank everyone. Child labor steals childhood. It steals the innocence of a child, and it prevents a child from having that education that is very crucial. I mean, the magistrate who contributed, Chief Magistrate Elkanah Oye, said something about education being the bedrock, the foundation that the child needs. And your Lord also made mention of that. Education is crucial. And it's important that children of similar ages should learn together. Because when we delay their education or stop them from getting educated, then we have almost like set them up to fail. Neither delay nor stop a child from being educated, because we want that child to work in the home or on the farm. It's not in the child's best interest. We should have the best interest of the child, not what the child can do for us. We should invest in some energy-saving devices and labor-saving devices, if we can, and not just get a child in the home to do all the work. Whether it's your own child or a child from another family, I think we should just try and be kind. Be kind and be more thoughtful in what we do. It's difficult, but we can try. We can try. And again, we are not saying that children shouldn't work at all. I think somebody also threw a light on that. We're talking about age-appropriate work that does not interfere with the child's education and well-being. Yes, there is beneficial work, but child labor is simply a no-no. We should always have that distinction. So as we celebrate Children's Day tomorrow and every other year, let's prioritize their well-being and work towards ending child labor. For those employing domestic help, I urge us to treat them with kindness and respect. We should conduct our thorough background checks, and when we have an agreement with them, let's comply and stick to the agreement. From today's webinar, it's clear that our laws are fraught with gaps, and so much more is needed as well in terms of the infrastructure and the government. So much to do. However, in spite of all of that, I wish to appeal to our collective conscience to protect children's rights and do the best we can for our children. The government may not have everything. In our own way, whatever we can do to make sure that the child is protected, we should do it, and we should try and eliminate child labor. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you so much, the committee chair. And just to wrap this up, thank you so much. The committee chair took this out of my mouth. I've been monitoring the numbers. I said it before that I'm a number person, and the numbers have remained relatively stable even over the 2 hours, 34 minutes that we've been here. And I'm hoping that we are all leaving with something tangible as we all go. So thank you so much for being here. Once again, my name is Chimdimma Onwebu, and I've had the singular privilege of being your moderator in this event. As tomorrow comes being the Children's Day, please permit me to wish us all happy Children's Day, because after all, we are all somebody's child. And hopefully we'll see you again some other time.
Indeed, we
Thank you
are.
very
Can I
much.
say
Indeed,
God
one
bless
quick
you.
word, please, Chimney?
All right.
Let's say one quick word, please, if you don't mind, please.
All right, please.
I want to invite every one of us. I see the passion, like you have also said, and I would like to invite all of us to join the NAFC Jump. It's actually the Nigerian Association of Family Court Judicial Officers, legal practitioners, and other practitioners, family court practitioners. I think there's a lot that we can do together. You know what they say about numbers make strength. So all of us pulling together, I'm sure we can do much more than when we are on our own singly. So I invite you all. Mrs. Obinwa can tell you how to get to join the association. It's going to be a great one for Nigerian children and for all of us. And of course, I wish all of us happy Children's Day. We're all children, aren't we? After all, somebody's child that we all are. Thank you so much. And then all of you have a good evening. Thank you.
May Lord count me in.
Okay, thank you so much. I
Bye.
like that. That's really
Bye.
excited. Thank you. Keep well. Bye.
All right, bye now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Well done.